Hello my beautiful watchers and welcome to the final episode of this season of a series of unfortunate reviews. Sorry for the delay in getting this one finished, I just didn't really want to do it. Jumping right in anyway, this is another occasion where all of the individual plot events of the episode that are arguably loyal to the book come wrapped up in a burrito of slightly or completely different context, which I will go into more detail about shortly, but for now I shall simply list chronologically. Olaf going to see a fortune teller by the name of Madame Lulu at her carnival in the hopes that she can tell him what to do next in his quest to find, murder, and steal the inheritance of the Baudelaire orphans. The three children in question emerging from hiding from the trunk of his car, getting their bearings, and deciding, due to their lack of transportation, that the best course of action for them is to disguise themselves as carnival freaks and seek employment with Madame Lulu. Despite iffy disguises, no one recognizing them because of the weird logic that runs this world of theirs, so they get the job and are introduced to their fellow freaks. A man with a hunch, a contortionist, and an ambidextrous gentleman. I sincerely hope that you find the concept of an ambidextrous man who thinks that's an abnormality, and a woman who believes that being able to contort herself makes it mandatory for her to do so, fucking side-splitting hilarious, because those jokes will be repeated over and over and over again in both the book and the TV show. This is an excellent example of why I just don't get on with these stories. Handler picks like 3 or 4 jokes and sticks with them religiously, so if you happen to not find them particularly funny in the first place, you're kind of buggered. Anyways, this is where the connection to the book gets a little sketchy because of all the changes that preceded these episodes. The kids work in the carnival for a bit. Madame Lulu tells Olaf that one of the Baudelaire parents survived the fire that burned down their home and is probably hiding in the mountains nearby. The kids get wind of it, and Olaf brings lions to the circus to spice things up a bit and decrees that they're going to throw the freaks in one by one for people's amusement. The kids sneak into Madame Lulu's tent and find out that she's not really magic. Madame Lulu reveals herself to be a woman named Olivia and confirms there is a chance that one of their parents is alive, even if she can't be 100% sure, and agrees to help them make their way to the mountains the next day to look for them. Shortly later, Esme Squalor, having become jealous of all the attention that Olaf is giving Madame Lulu, propositions the workers of the carnival that instead of willingly jumping into a lion pit to their horrible death, they throw Lulu in instead, then she'll talk Olaf into hiring them as additional henchmen. Violet decides to construct cross-country transportation out of a broken roller coaster cart, but needs one last essential part, and just before they can get it, they get dragged by Olaf to the lion pit to take part in the first public devouring. Violet and Klaus are randomly chosen to be the first into the pit, but they stall long enough for the crowd to start getting angsty, so Olaf offers a prize to whoever pushes them in, and after a lot of confusion, Olivia ends up being the one getting eaten. Olaf burns down the carnival to erase any potential evidence of him inciting murder there, and says he's going to let all the former employees join his team. The orphans aren't too keen on this, but are forced to agree, as he's planning on heading the way they need to go, i.e. the mountains, in search of this supposed surviving parent. Sunny is taken into the car, but there's apparently not enough room for the 2 older Baudelaires, so they travel in the caravan they've hooked up to the back. However, it turns out Olaf was onto them and has his new underlings cut the rope halfway up the mountain, ending the installment on a literal cliffhanger. So, going into this, I could not for the life of me figure out how the Jiminy fucknuggets they were planning to do the Madame Lulu Olivia story after they'd already introduced this whole multi-episode story arc for her becoming a VFD agent. I couldn't think of a way that they could make any of her actions in the Carnivorous Carnival book make any sense after all these changes to her character. It turns out the answer was they just sort of powered through it and either bent over backwards to work her motivations into the new VFD subplot or just straight up ignored the plot holes they were creating. Just so we're on the same page here, in the books Olivia was a character who just showed up in the Carnivorous Carnival, knew of the VFD but wasn't a member, and had a psychological need to tell people what they wanted to hear. For a living, she pretended to be a magic fortune teller while actually just looking up the answers to people's questions in a secret stash of paper she kept hidden under the table, the pre-1998 version of Googling it. Her carnival was falling on hard times, so she passive-aggressively demanded that Olaf help her revitalize it before she would give him any more details on the Baudelaire family. Olaf's solution was retrieving some old VFD-owned lions and suggesting the death sport, which Lulu was all in favor of if it made her money. The Baudelaires search her tent, find out she's a fraud, confront her, and get her to agree to help them after she breaks down over how much death and destruction she's caused over the last few books by constantly directing Olaf to their new foster homes. Alas, despite this supposed change of heart, she just couldn't overcome her need to give people what they want, so snitches to Olaf about them, and, more importantly, when push came to shove, she was willing to throw Klaus and Violet into the lion pit to save herself. In comparison, and in recap of the last few episodes, the show introduced Olivia as a librarian 3 books early in the Austere Academy, where it turned out she was the only adult who thought it might be a good idea idea to try to track down the kidnapped students, which got the attention of the VFD, who sent Jacques Snicket to recruit her. They started a romance, and he sent her to find the carnival just before he was killed by Olaf in the village of foul devotees. In the show's version of this world, the carnival is a full VFD outpost, because apparently every bloody thing has to be, and being Madame Lulu is an interchangeable job title assigned to different agents as required. The former title holder, who I'm going to go ahead and predict right now is Kit Snicket, got Olivia to fill in for her while she went to Heimlich Hospital to retrieve the coveted sugar bowl that was hidden there. After Olaf rocks up, Olivia tries to keep him busy while simultaneously trying to help the Baudelaires, and to this end she asks him and his employees to help out at the show, and tries to confirm that his suspicion that there is a survivor of the fire is true just to mess with him, though she also suspects that might actually be true because of the film of Jacques talking about it. At the climax, she saves the kids by throwing them right over the pit to the other side, which I guess might be the payoff for that weird book throwing scene I complained about, but I'm not convinced. Then she tries to hold Olaf off while they escape, resulting in him dumping her in the pit to be torn apart by lions. All in all, a much more heroic character with a much more relevant story arc. As a result of all these changes to her, they had to ditch her secret library of research that she used to convince people she was clairvoyant, and her obsession with giving people what they want, the original key defining feature of her character. Examples of the plot holes this opens up include why she flirted with or tried to impress Olaf with her fake fortune-telling when it clearly would have been in her best interest to make him leave as soon as possible so she could reveal herself to the orphans and help them more openly. And why she felt she had to pretend that she was okay with throwing her employees to a horrible death in the lion pit when, again, she had no motivation to get on Olaf's good side and just wanted him to bugger off. Her new backstory also affects Olaf's actions and motivations quite considerably. Madame Lulu was the reason that Olaf always knew where to find the Baudelaires no matter which foster home they were moved to in the book, but because they were changing who Madame Lulu was, and she was a recurring character that he'd met before, meant they couldn't really do that in the show, so this was the first time he'd gone to her, which made that explanation useless, which is also presumably why they always started the shows with him physically following them in a car. Did any of that make any sense? I think my brain performed a hard reset halfway through that sentence. This also makes Olaf seem a little inconsistent, as he decides to drive all the way to the carnival to give Madame Lulu a try, then is instantly dismissive and skeptical about her, though I suppose it is Olaf, he's not supposed to be the most level-headed of people. I also consider it a bit of a stretch that he introduces the horrific death via line entertainment now just because he was butthurt that no one was coming to see the shows that he didn't really want to take part in the first place. He does, however, also look a little smarter in the show too, as he actually puts two and two together himself in regards to the Baudelaire's identity when he found the misplaced hospital tag. In the book, the hate-sink version of Olaf had that spelled out for him by Madame Lulu when she couldn't overcome her need to give people what they want and ended up selling the kids out, and he simply claimed that that made him a genius. They're still pushing the rhyming scheme way past breaking point in the intro songs, though oddly enough, Harris sings it slightly different in this second episode in order to draw attention to that. They dropped in a reference to Handler's classic, a phrase which here means at the beginning, which was a nice touch. I'm really not sure why the volunteer fire department would be hosting a swinging 20s themed party, but I did like that they tied that whole scene back to a tangent that Snicket went off on a few books back, where he described a fancy dress party where he tried to give Beatrice a warning about Olaf. It was also kind of weird seeing a diegetic Patrick Warburton now that I think about it. At some point or another, every episode in this series has had a crowbarred-in monologue recapping events so far, because apparently there's someone out there somewhere not starting a Netflix show at the beginning. This particular pair of episodes was especially frustrating because I counted no less than 3 plot dump dialogue exchanges. In addition to being hilariously wrong about how weird being ambidextrous is, Kevin is also gorgeous now, I guess to accentuate how foolish his rampant self-pity is. They included one of the lines that I actually quite liked from the book, about how miracles are kind of like meatballs because no one's sure what they're made of, how many there should be, or what constitutes a real one. Oh joy, another musical number. I guess Neil was getting bored again. I know the joke here is that the carnival show is supposed to be kind of lame, but the sequence goes on for so long by the end of it the humour wears thin and you're basically just watching a lame show. Sunny's Chabo the Wolfchild disguise involved being wrapped up in a big fake beard in the book. Here she's just kind of dirty. I mean, they couldn't even stick the kid in a furry onesie? What's the problem here? How did none of these characters recognise this baby they've been trying to kidnap for like a month now? The show stuck to Daniel Handler's, I'm assuming intentional misunderstanding of what in the belly of the beast means, using it to mean any bad situation from being surrounded by enemies to being trapped in a wooden caravan careening down the side of a mountain. In the book, the carnival freaks were resigned to being eaten by lions because they'd been indoctrinated over time by Madame Lulu's obsession with giving people what they want, in this case the mobster desire to see a gruesome death. As I mentioned, they dropped that in the show, so it seems a little weird that they were just willing to roll with it until Esme suggested an alternative. I can only assume the directing for this scene was, Melina, look exceptionally happy and make sure it looks convincing because we're going to hang on this shot for an awkward amount of time. Oh, Stunt Bike Paperboy is back again. Okay, well, the books drive jokes into the ground through mindless repetition, so the show doing it too technically earns it adaptation points. They seem to be trying a bit harder with the soundtrack in this episode. I mean, it's no Vile Village, but it's okay. Wow, they really don't want to let go of Nathan Fillion. I've seen quite a few shows that keep bringing back dead characters in various ways because they like the actors, but if he makes even one more appearance next season, this may well have outdone them all. Oh good, Mr. Poe. Again. At this point, I'm forced to assume they signed a contract with this actor for the whole season without checking with the writers first to see if he was actually involved in any of the remaining plots. They changed it so the person asking if murdering people with lines is illegal was a child instead of an old woman, which is slightly funnier, but also makes Olaf's comment about putting him in his car a little dodgy sounding. I'm really starting to get annoyed with the way that everyone in the VFD keeps brandishing their telescopes as if they're a weapon. I mean, they established that they can be used to heat things up, but they've shown no offensive capabilities so far. So, I don't know, they're just planning to hit Olaf with them, but it looks really stupid. Bringing back the teachers from Prufrock Prep to fill in the roles of some of the minor background characters was interesting, I guess. I mean, I can't really fault them on getting creative with stuff like that. It's worth noting that the crowd did enjoy the spectacle of two people being torn apart by lions in the book. I guess that was just a little bit too dark for the show, so they had them being sort of horrified by it. Speaking of which, I was right, they're not killing off Olaf's henchmen in this version. I mean, I'm kind of happy in this case. This guy seems like a big old softie, so I didn't want to see him go in the pit with Olivia. In conclusion to this episode, and the whole second season, I have to admit I am struggling to care about this anymore, but if I did, I'm sure that, much like last season, the adaptation critic side of me would be at odds with the side of me that really didn't care for the book, so is glad the show is changing the story somewhat. Giving the Baudelaire kids a champion like Olivia, even if she ultimately failed to help them with anything other than jumping over a pit, flies in the face of one of the original ongoing themes of the book, i.e. the kids could not count on anyone except themselves, and everyone else would either die, be forced to leave them behind, abandon them when the going got tough, betray them to save themselves, or a horrible combination of several of these things. I know I've beaten this dead horse to a pulp at this point, but I'm still finding Neil Patrick Olaf to be too funny and charming to be the hate-sink character of the books. That said, though, I have changed my mind about what I think the motivation behind this casting choice was. Believing at first that they were just trying to recreate what Jim Carrey did with the role, 2 seasons in, I'm starting to realise that this was because they always planned to shift the focus away from the orphans, who originally solely held the spotlight, to a more even split between them and the bad guys, so they had to make said bad guys more fun to watch. Hating someone is fun, but it does get a little tiring after a while. The problem is, the writers seem to have used this as an excuse not to work on making the Baudelaires more interesting in any way, shape or form. I mean, I know they were basically defined by a single character trait in the books, but if they can develop the hook-handed man into a more interesting character, I'm sure they could have done something to make the orphans more three-dimensional. But no, there's never anything new to learn about them as people, just their mysterious parents. There's no character arcs for them to go through worth mentioning, no room for development, and figuratively, every word of dialogue out of their mouths is ham-fisted plot exposition. Season 2 has really driven home for me that Handler and the other writers are definitely making this show for the fans of the books first and foremost. They've completely abandoned the slow reveal of the VFD that was such a huge part of the series. I mean, at this point we already know what the letters are an abbreviation of, what the organisation stood for, and about the divide that occurred within it years ago. We didn't know any of that stuff by this point in the books. I'm convinced this is because they're assuming there's no point in teasing this stuff because the watchers will already know it all, or at least as much as there is to know. A lot of stuff was intentionally left unexplained at the end of the books. Looking at you, contents of the sugar bowl. I don't think this will stop non-book readers from enjoying the show, but they definitely won't be getting the same experience. If it's a better, worse, or just different experience will be a matter of opinion, I suppose. So, that's a wrap for another year, or possibly forever if no one requests I review the next season when it comes out. I'll probably watch it anyway just because I'm curious to see how they handle the great unknown, but I wouldn't blame you if you don't ask me to do any episodes on it, because I know I've been kind of a downer about this whole series so far. If you can forgive me for that enough to throw a like on this video, I'd appreciate it, as it is a massive help in combating the bizarre and virtually inconceivable YouTube algorithm. As always, thank you for joining me, my beautiful watchers. Hello again, my beautiful watchers. I just wanted to take this opportunity to give you a quick reminder that there's a wonderful website called Patreon that's been allowing online producers to actually make a living doing what they do, since apparently YouTube's decided that they shouldn't anymore. Basically, they offer the chance to pledge a certain amount of money per month or per video in exchange for various rewards offered by the creator. There's a variety of stuff you can earn by becoming one of my patrons, including early access to all videos and taking part in that survey you see at the start of every Lost in Adaptation episode. That's actually a very important part of the process, as I use it to gauge how much I'm going to need to explain about the book and the film before I start comparing them. If you decide to become a higher level contributor, your name will be added to the credits that you're seeing right now, and you'll be given the option to join my private chat room so you can regularly talk with me and other patrons. If you're keen enough to join the topmost tier of patronage, you'll earn the most coveted of all the rewards, the chance to pick a future adaptation to be reviewed by yours truly. However, if right now you are thinking, "My goodness the Dom, I can't do that, for I have no money left after building a personal fortress to prepare for the coming zombie apocalypse. Do you have any idea how expensive a lifetime supply of food, water, and ammunition is?" Fear not, it would still be a huge help to me if you were to give that like button the old clickaroo, share this episode on social media with perhaps a little recommendation to your friends to check it out, and subscribe if you've not already. It really helps my channel grow and reach new beautiful watchers. I hope you have a most pleasant day, and I will see you in the next episode.